Okay, so I think you can hear me also as well, right?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I was quite nervous because, yeah, things are coming in a lot of in my mind, and I was not getting much direction. And whenever I talk about implementation, this proverb, do not speak unless you can improve the silent, that comes in my mind. And I have been told it many times. So while I was reading a lot, also I have few uh, actual real life issues, which I am not sharing it today. But I would show it's more theoretical, more conceptual, what I am facing, I am reading, I am going through. So these are just a kind of facing a lot of questions without many answers, structured one. And also, of course, as I said, I have this implementation, that topic I love, because at the ground level, there are a lot of things that I'm facing, which I would not discuss today. So why study implementation? Because we know that our policies fail, DRR in our context, or at least appear to fail. We can presumably learn how to make DRR policy more successful by this study of implementation. But we can redesign our policies. But the question is that we are always redesigning our policies from our learning. But how do we study implementation? And how do we can ensure the implementation? Can implementation we separate from policy making, or they are same? These are some of the questions that coming to me. Some of the complaints are in the public policy. In our case, it is DRR policies and plans. We often say that, we have a lot of data, but no theory. We used to be based on particular case studies with no generalization theories. Or maybe it's the other way around. That means we have theories, no empirical or case station or field-based support. So all theory, no data, or maybe all data, no theory. So we plan something, our reality is different, our reality is something which is not matching with the reality of other place. So a policy implementation dichotomy, make policy, step one, implement policy. The traditional distinction between policy making and implementation parallels the politics administration dichotomy. That was the reference I gave. But when we act to implement a policy, we change it. As you can see it here as well. Of course, it's a different context, more lighter context. But yes, when we act to implement a policy, we change it. Then why is this so much a problem? Is there an ideal type of implementation? Can we imagine a perfectly performing policy? Or is just a principles and aspirations and dreams? Maybe these are two ends. Maybe one end, we have perfectly performing policy idea. It requires only execution. And the only problem it raises on those of control questions. On the other end, the policy ideal is the only expression of basic principles or dreams or vision, a matter of philosophical reflection and political debate. And what would be the path is unknown. And in between of these two extreme poles, one is perfect performing policy, and another is the principles and dreams or vision. We have more or less developed potential embedded pieces of legislative court decisions, bureaucratic plans, etc. and etc. I'm a student of city planning, urban planning, and we were told when I was a student that the essential constituents of any policy, there should be two objectives. There should be two components. One is objectives and other one the resources. In most policies of interest, objectives are characteristically multiple because we want many things, not just one. And also conflicting our objectives are because we want different things. And also vague because that is how we can agree to proceed without having to agree also on exactly what to do, right? So here, Valdavosky said, the implementation begins neither with words nor deeds, but with multiple disposition to act and to treat certain situation in certain ways. So we prior experience and assumptions, therefore, they matter. Disposition, tendency for something to act in a certain manner under given circumstance. So, perception of the effectiveness of implementation is likely to be predicted on an actor's initial evaluation of the statute. Here you can see the person on the one act working on trying to pull out the water coming in. Other person is relaxed, thinking that the hole is not in our end. The place of politics, therefore, in implementation. Well, the one player is completely complete supporters of what they think the directors want, and the other group is deviant. They put their own spin on policy or knowingly undermine or counteract the policy, or they are passive, indifferent, and from whom inaction secures their stake against those seeking changes. So therefore, Plambo said, these are those who exploit a particular interpretation of policy, goals, as a way of attaining power. Implementation tend to be participants in policy network and they implementer are the participants in the network. And they play an important, predominant role in interpreting these policy directives. Policy content that shapes the implementation, they either define the arena, define the role and identity, and defines the range of permissible tools for action. And also they provide supply resources. Therefore, can we think that implementation is really as an evolution? Why is that we think when we have to implement something, it is actually genetically should be same what we thought and what we implemented. So our original policy idea, shall we change it or not? When social security changes from insurance to income redistribution, the same name conveys different realities. This is reported by Valdavosky and Majuni. Now, question concerning organizational structure and program of delivery. How centralized? I think many of our speakers raised the same questions. Is it top-down, bottom-up management? Or how much, what extent the lower level administrator, participants they can come in the decision-making process. And also, we would like to know how democratic, how many agencies, groups, governments, they would be involved and implementing this program. There are two. One could be top-down assumptions, where the roles are very defined, performance can be also measured, and policy tools are also very clearly defined and mentioned, and a very authoritative statement of policy. These are the character of the single statute. There is an implementation chain that starts with policy message at the top and sees implementation as an occurring in a chain. Therefore, policy designers have a good knowledge of the capacity, commitment of the implementers. That is from the top-down approach. This could be a typical skeletal flow or diagram of the top-down implementation framework. Here, the role of the statute: selection of implementing institutions, providing legal and financial resources to those institutions, through biasing the probable policy orientation of agency officials, and regulating the opportunity of participation. Another would be bottom-up. This is more of a backward planning process that we had during our city planning, of course, in which the implementation process and the relevant relationships are mapped backward from the ultimate implementer to the policy designer. It's the other way around. The goals are ambiguous. There is no predetermined, defined role, but we have some aspirations, and we start from that scratch, from that vision. And we change. It's more of an emerging game, and may conflict not only with our goals in the same policy, but also there would be conflict related to norms, motivation of the street level bureaucrats. Barkland saying that bottom-up makes sense when there is no dominant program, when one is more interested in local dynamics of implementation than in the broad sweep design. Although the actions of most public service workers actually constitute the services delivered by the government. When taken together, the individual decision of these workers become, as we have to add up, become agency policy. Then there could be a third generation of models that recognize both bottom-up and top-down. Now, what accounts for the differential success of public policies in the implementation process? A problem of organizational management or a conflict of interest over values? A problem of organizational management in this case is the goal ambiguity and also the control over subordinates, communication between policymakers and subordinates, technical incompetence, and inappropriate agent political discretion. Implementation regime framework. An implementation regime can be arranged among implementation participants that identifies the value to be served during the implementation process and provides an organizational framework to promote values. The primary task of, therefore, implementation is to create context that will induce the participant to cooperate in the presence of conflict of interest. When these conditions are absent, implementation regime participants may use such mechanism as side payments, issue linkage, norms of reciprocity in order to build trust and cooperation that is suggested. I would skip this part a little bit because I would come to here that reasons why participants may agree with the substantive ends of a proposal and still oppose direct incompatibility, or maybe preference of other programs, simultaneous commitments, dependence on others who lack a sense of urgency, differences of opinions on leadership and proper organizational roles, legal and procedural differences, and lack of power or resources. There could be many more, but these are the some of I found can be from previous literature they mentioned. There is this question of the solution, but I am not really sure about the solution. So I also put it like that. Don't speak unless you improve the silence. And I do not have much solutions I have jotted down, but as I'm reading through, I am bombarded. I have a lot of questions that are coming up and that I shared. And also, if we look into the trajectory of this literature, I found as I read, particularly in public administration and policy arena, there are a lot of literature exist, and they do seriously talk about the implementation questions rather than I found the health related science, public policy, public health policy questions are much more narrower model dependent than compared to the public administration approach towards the question of implementations. Of course, they don't call it really implementation science. So yes, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate for listening me. Questions, comments, yeah.